Thank you, Women of Hope, for this invitation, and for all of you for being here, being women who are looking outside of themselves, who are dedicated to seeing what God's doing around the world. And it is so easy for all of us to get so focused on our own spaces and our own things, because we have things. And I just love the opportunity to be in a setting, in a digital room. I imagine us all sitting around in a cozy living room setting, just connecting and hearing each other's hearts, and just being connected through the Holy Spirit of being people who are saying, God is doing something, and I want to be a part of it. And one of the ways that I consistently see that is in my work with people who carry a story of forced displacement. And so I won't get into lots of data about the reality, but I do want to frame what we're talking about. So currently in our world right now, we hear constant stories of new upheavals of governments, of natural disasters. We just heard about the typhoon in Vietnam, and we all, hopefully you've heard about the earthquake in Myanmar, a place that is very, very rich, unfortunately, in conflict. And many forced displacements are being impacted, and people are being displaced a third or fourth time because of that. And so we see more and more, what I would say is that all creation is groaning, that there's a bit of an outcry, and the rise of unfortunately unstable places. That the movement of people, the forced movement of people, is only increasing. So currently, right now, per the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, which is the holder of the numbers, there are about 122 million forcibly displaced people in the world. That boils down to about 1 in every 68 people is or is currently being forcibly displaced. The reasons for the displacement are many, but the core of it is saying that my place at home, my home, is no longer a safe place for me to be. It's no longer a place that is inhabitable, and that terrible decision to be, I'm going to move into the unknown. I'm going to leave everything I have. I'm going to leave a language I understand. I'm going to leave my country, often a place of stability for generations. And I'm going to step into the unknown for the sake of what comes after me, for the sake of my own life, and often for women, for the sake of their children and their families. We know that the movement of people is not just for men or adults. The numbers break down to about 50% women, 50% men, and about 40% children. And so this is impacting the vulnerable of the vulnerable. And so the need is great. The movement of people is going to continue, but what we can find hope in, and what I want to share with you, is a couple stories of hope and a couple stories of encouragement. I was recently asked by a friend, as I was sharing about I was just recently in Malawi working in the Zuleka refugee camp, and where it's about 60,000 forcibly displaced people. And I've had the joy and opportunity to do quite a bit of work there and build good relationships with people in the camp. And I was asked, how do you hold all this? And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir of, I hold all this because Jesus holds me, right? And we know that God is the one who cares and God is the one who sees. And find great hope in walking alongside people that have suffered and people that are walking through things. And it brings me encouragement and light on a consistent basis. And so the hope that I see, I want to kind of boil down to I want to highlight three women for you, who I am grateful to call dear friends, because this is a global issue. This is not a new issue. This is not something that is new to the world. When we look biblically, right, we see from Genesis the movement of people. We see that God not only moves people for his kingdom and for his purposes, but moves people for protection. In fact, Jesus himself was a refugee fleeing with Mary and Joseph to Egypt. And so one of the wild things that I think about Jesus is that not only is he the God who conquered death and the grave, but he's like, I've lived the suffering and I've walked those paths. And so it is a beautiful thing to be able to share that space with people who have forcibly displaced and remind them that Jesus himself knows that pain, that I maybe won't and maybe can't, but Jesus himself knows and understands. Sorry about my video there. And so I want to first start with a story of my friend Miriam. Now, Miriam, I met here in Vienna. She is from Syria, and we met in German class, struggling to remember our articles and grammar, and suffering alongside each other in that space. And we became friends. And as I grew in relationship with Miriam, I had the pleasure to hear more of her story. And Miriam, I think, is a bit of um, an archetype, if you will, of the strength of a woman in this space. So she was born in Syria, moved to Iraq to study, and then married her husband and moved back to Syria, and then the war broke out. And so they started on a journey, went to Iraq. She got pregnant, great joy in getting pregnant, but then it was unstable for them. And so they had to make the decision to try to come to Europe. And so she journeyed through Europe for 7 months, pregnant. And so she talks about climbing and walking through Serbia and Albanian mountains, 7 months pregnant. And I asked her one time, I was like, Miriam, how did you keep going? How did you, were you just, I don't know, how would you do that? And she said, because I knew what is before me has to be better than what's behind me. And so I will keep going for this child inside of me. And that kind of strength and resilience I see consistently among women and men, but especially I think that there's a special strength that lies inside of us women that can overcome adversity in pretty remarkable ways. And so Miriam is yet to believe in Jesus. She's still a Muslim, but I call her one who's close to the kingdom as she sees more and more of the reality of there might be a real presence of Jesus that's with her. And then I want to share about my friend Mama Grace. Now, Mama Grace is originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and she was forced to flee her home 15 years ago. She was fleeing an abusive husband and then tribal warfare, and found her way to Dzaleka refugee camp in Malawi. And she, was escaping an abusive husband and came to this place of great desolation and wilderness, and struggled for many, many years. Was found it really, really challenging to keep going. Her children were the reason she got up. She opened a clothing store. She is a top businesswoman and an entrepreneur, and kept finding new ways to make space and a way for there to be hope and a future for her kids. And all of this was girded by her love for Jesus. And so she found her way to a church. And in a highly patriarchal society, she is now an honored woman in the church and one of the elders, which this is not a denominational or theological discussion, but I count it to be a really high honor for her. And in that, she started seeing all the trauma that I've carried. She was able to go through a Healing the Wounds of Trauma group with a group that Kenya came through and found great restoration. And so in that space of, I want to share what the Lord has done for me to others, she started opening up her home to women to come and just find a place of peace and find a place of healing. And so her home became a house of healing. And so she consistently just opened up more and more groups, and more women and men found restoration and healing from their trauma. And now she's had the opportunity to open a center right outside the camp that will be a place of healing and restoration. And I was just with her as we sat in this hall, just singing together the praises of the Lord, though she is still a refugee and probably will never be resettled, and her homeland will probably never be secure enough for her to return. She is one that has said, I will bring beauty from ashes in this space where I find myself. That it is not outside of God's will to call her into this space that I would call wildly desolate. And yet she calls the place of God's blessing. And so that challenge that I'm consistently faced with in walking alongside my friends whose lives are so different than mine. And also when I was in Zuleika, I sat in the living room of a dear friend and his wife, and they were just sharing the hardships, and said, we smile a lot because we want to be joyful and we're glad you're here, but inside we are really wondering where the Lord is. And the wife turned to me and said, Whitney, I just wonder, did we do something? Is this God's punishment to us? And is that fair for my children that this is the life that they're living in this refugee camp? And so, without having any idea how to answer that, I simply asked her, I don't think that's how God works. And I would ask, did I do something right that says that I have the passport I have and I live in a country that is free from conflict? Is that a sign of God's blessing to me? And so that started a really beautiful conversation of God's sovereignty and God's blessing, and how God not only works in the really beautiful green pastures, all is well, and we are on the mountaintop, but in the wilderness. And that reminds me of Hagar in the Bible. Hagar is a character that will often come up when we're talking about forced displacement, because that is a woman who faced great adversity and abuse and fled. And I have so many questions when I get to heaven to ask Jesus about all of that. And like, what are you doing, Lord? What is that about? But that this woman, this Egyptian slave, this almost insignificant to maybe the grand story of the people of God, God gives this really special spotlight to. And so she runs away. She's kind of in the wilderness twice, right? The first time she runs away because she's getting so abused and mistreated by Sarah. And God finds her and says, where are you going? And I just love that. I think so many times I love the idea that God finds us. And I know that I've experienced that so many times in my life of just feeling found by the Lord. And he comes to her and says, hey, girl, where are you going? Girl, what's your plan here? Where are you going? And she says, I'm being abused. I'm getting out of here. And he asks her to go back and lets her know she is pregnant and that child is blessed and that child will be protected by the Lord. And she's the first person that's recorded, and several, especially the woman who's gave God a name, that you are the God who sees. And that beautiful truth that you are the God who sees. I think that a reality that in the wilderness, she was able to see God and she was able to feel God's presence, unlike when she was back in the tent or back in a place of great community. And I think that's one thing that I see so consistently. And I'm reflecting, honestly, very personally in my life right now, feeling like I'm walking through a bit of a wilderness season, is that God's presence is often the strongest in the wilderness. It is often this beautiful place of God meeting with us in a place of desolation, in a place where no one would ask for. Don't bring me here, God. I am a fan of green pastures. I am a fan of mountaintop experiences. I'm a fan of joy and laughter and all the things that are beautiful. And yet God is saying, and sometimes invites us into, there's a prayer in the Lectio 365 app right now. If you aren't a user, please be a user. It's a great app to use, and they're doing a wilderness series right now. And there's this prayer that I love that says, Lord, you lead me to where I am lost and found again. And God finds us in these spaces. And I think that is the biggest place of hope for me. When I think about the giant numbers of forced displacement, when I think about the amount of needs, when I think about the requests that I get on a daily basis for help, for assistance, for attention, does anyone see us? Does anyone care? Does anyone know that we're here? And to say, I get to be a person that says, I see you. And you know what? God sees you. You are not alone. Because we have a God who meets us in the wilderness, who doesn't wait for us in the place of peace, doesn't wait for us in the place of conflict-free zones, doesn't wait for us in the place of great blessing by the world standards. He meets us where we are. And so, God of the God of the wilderness who comes and speaks and ministers and shows up. How beautiful is this God? How good is this God? And so, refugees, as we say in my organization, are not just people in need. They're image bearers. They are children of God. And I am utterly convinced, my friends, that God is at work in the movement of people because he has always done this throughout history. We look through scripture, he is constantly at work through the movement of people. God is a God on the move. And so we get to just simply be a part of that and watch what he's doing and watch what he is unfolding and how he brings beauty from ashes. And he says, all is not lost because, oh, death, where is your sting? Oh, hell, where is your victory? Because he has overcome all of those things to stand in that place and say, I am the high priest who is acquainted with all of your sufferings. And I meet you in that place and I lead you by your hand. And I say, take heart. Because this trouble is real and I see it. And I know the tears and I know the pain. And yet I am with you. And so that beautiful promise, that beautiful declaration of his goodness, even in places that feel wildly bleak and barren, is something that fills me with great joy. And I think one of the reasons that I think God drew my heart to working with refugees and those that have been forced to displace, and to see especially women step into all that God has for them. And so I want to finish by reading Psalm 138. And then I'm going to just do one little extra thing. And then I'm excited to just spend some time in a beautiful song and then just praying together. Because that is right. That is our greatest response, just going right to Jesus, that God who sees, knows, and cares, and can be so present in that. So this is Psalm 138. I give you thanks, O Lord, with my whole heart. Before the gods, I sing your praise. I bow down towards your holy temple and give thanks to your name for your steadfast love and your faithfulness. For you have exalted above all things your name and your word. On the day I called, you answered me. My strength of soul you increased. All the kings of the earth shall give you thanks, O Lord, for they have heard the words of your mouth, and they shall sing of the ways of the Lord, for great is the glory of the Lord. For though the Lord is high, he regards the lowly, but the haughty he knows from afar. Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve my life. You stretch out your hand against the wrath of my enemies, and your right hand delivers me. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your steadfast love, O Lord, endures forever. Do not forsake the work of your hands. This promise, the Lord will fulfill his purpose for me, is one that I have heard repeated by my friends who have gone through forced displacement. And I've struggled with and thought, okay, God, your good and perfect will has not changed because they're a refugee now. This is part of it. And so in that place of the wilderness, in that place of the valley of the shadow of death, as we read in Psalm 23, we can say the Lord will fulfill his plans for me, and they are good plans. And those good plans remain because he is the one on the throne, and he is the one who holds all of it in his hands. And we can know that if it's not good, it's not the end. And so God is at work, and I am so grateful to be a part of walking alongside those who say, the Lord will fulfill his purposes for me. And I will say and speak in the valley of the living, the Lord is good.